Hi. So, for the past, I don't know, 3.5 years, I have had the fortunate or unfortunate position of being the person in charge of the front end build pipeline in projects that I've been in. And what I mean by front end build pipeline, I mean that you probably have, well, in the front end projects I've been in, we use JavaScript. And usually the JavaScript we write is not the JavaScript that the browser gets, right? You end up having multiple layers of transpiling the code. Whether that's because you're using something like TypeScript, so you want to do some type checking and transformations. Maybe you're using Babel to use modern JavaScript features, and so on. The reason being, just to get everybody up to date, is that JavaScript is the main scripting language that browsers run, and it has different versions by some definition of that, but it's a rolling window. So it's not like, hey, we have version 5 and version 6, even though marketing wise we might speak about it. There is no strict versioning, at least in browsers. The reason you don't have versioning is that, or well, you do have versioning, but you can't really remove things, is that if you remove things, then websites that exist out there that might have been written, 2, 5, 10, 20 years ago will stop working. So you can't break the web, basically. Now, if you're coming from any language that hasn't had this constraint, I envy you. But part of that sort of, and also it's not just that, right? It's also that even in this moment, any browser that runs has a different set of features. So, maybe Firefox doesn't have every feature that maybe Chrome has, or Chrome might not have features that Firefox has, or whatever the heck WebKit is doing, Safari is doing these days. Or even that concurrently, I might be on version, 85 of Chrome, and like you might be on version 84 of Chrome. So turns out if you want your code to run everywhere, you have to somehow process it. In addition to that, which is making these transformations, basically, you also want to modularize things, right? You want to say, organize your code into modules. Again, the specifics of the module system are not super important at the moment, so that you can have separate files and organize your code neatly, and fight other people about how your code should be organized. Like, you should be able to do that. Maybe don't fight too much. I don't know. Who might tell you what to do? And that specific combination of constraints, especially constraints, well, the design space, in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever you want to call it, has led to a rise in tools. For example, Webpack is a very popular one that will, as it says here, it will bundle your assets. Webpack is like a gigantic piece of software, like tens of thousands of lines of code, that will take a bunch of your source scripts and it will do something to them, and the browser can use them. Oh, another constraint I forgot is that JavaScript doesn't only run in the browsers nowadays, it also runs on like servers or like even embedded devices and stuff like that. So Node, for example, is a kind of runtime for JavaScript that is not the same as the browser runtime. So something that was also quite common, still is, I think, is that you want to write code that runs both in Node and the browser. And again, because the browsers and Node have different semblances, like different representations of how modules work, you need some kind of transformation, either like from one format to the other. What the heck are these formats? In Node, that format is common.js. You might have seen it as you basically export an object with like keys being the, like, I don't know, what do you call them? I don't know, the main things you're exporting, basically. Whereas the browsers nowadays use what's called ES modules or ECMAScript modules. Now, ECMAScript is JavaScript. ECMA is a standards organizations like ISO that has basically the standard anyway. There's so many standards on the web. And that format is two things. So that format is a module format that runs at runtime, but it's also an authoring format. So if you've seen, for example, in a browser, well, in source code, when you say import, like, I don't know, do the math from math module, that sort of syntax that you can have a representation of imports in JS, that is ES modules, at least in, again, syntactically. So tools like Webpack allow you to take files written in that format or in multiple formats, actually, because you can mix and match formats, at least in Webpack, and make it run in the browser. Now, if that sounds complicated, it's because it is. Like, again, like, go look at the Webpack source code. It's so much stuff in there. And because you have to handle different formats and combinations of formats and so on and so forth. Now, again, browsers nowadays do run JavaScript modules natively. And now we're getting slowly to to the thing I'm talking to you about today. And because browsers run these modules natively, you don't actually need to bundle with multiple asterisks that I'll explain to you later. You don't need to bundle everything. You still need to transform them because you want to use the modern JavaScript features. So you still need something like Babel to again, allow you to use decorators or some other modern feature. But even other modern features, by some definition, are in the browsers today, and they have been for years. Like classes are in the browser. Again, ES modules are in the browser, and so on. Now, in practice for production, you do want to bundle still, because even though the browser can resolve these modules dynamically, you end up going to the network quite quickly. Here's where I would love to have some illustrations, but as I've said multiple times in the past few months, I am super damn tired and I don't have any energy to do slides. And I apologize because I know some of you could really get something out of them. But anyway, you can run these ES modules directly in your browser, which is quite nice. You still want to do it for production, for performance reasons. You don't want to be saying, okay, if I import a component and that component imports another component, that's already like going to the network 2 times, and then sort of it cascades from there. And I don't know if you've looked in your node modules anytime soon, but there's probably thousands of modules in there that you end up importing. So it's kind of hellish to use the ES modules just without any build tools at all in production. You need some kind of thing, and that thing might be very bespoke that you've written for your application. I don't know why you would do that unless you're some big organization with resources, to be honest. Or you bundle for production. But for development, you don't need to bundle. And that's the core idea, at least behind this thing that I haven't even introduced yet. It's called Vite, not Vite, but anyway, Vite apparently is fast in French or something. I don't know if the francophones in the room can attest to that. But anyway, and the core thing of Vite that it tries to solve is that, running npm install and npm dev, let's say, that spins up the development server, should not make your computer, burn with the heat of a million suns. I don't know about you, but in every project I've been in, especially projects that tend to share code between code bases, you have some kind of Webpack development, like configuration file, which still bundles all of your source code in development. And again, your app might not have 1,000 modules, might have like a few hundred modules. Your node modules folder, however, has thousands of modules. Like I can guarantee it. And like maybe not all of the code is used and gets resaken and so on, but it's still a lot of code that you have to process in development every time you make a change with a tool that is written in JavaScript, which like JavaScript can be made fast if you run it multiple times because it runs on a JIT. So once you run the code multiple times, the whatever VM is processing the code can make it fast. But actually, build tools are in a very bad spot for these optimizations because you tend to run them once. Like I run the build every time the change happens. So they don't really get to go on the fast path of JavaScript, which is a bit of a shame. So what Vite does in development actually is quite nice. Vite is not a bundler by itself. It is, you can think of it as a tool that wraps some existing tools, which I think is nice because it's one less thing to start wondering about. So what it does, actually, maybe I can just run my terminal. I don't know. I haven't decided how I want to do this. No, I'll keep talking about this first. So Vite uses a thing called ESBuild. ESBuild is a very fast JavaScript bundler that is not ready for production because it's missing some very more advanced features like code splitting or how exactly to handle CSS modules and so on. But it's more than good enough for development. Again, this is about speeding up development because it should not take 30 seconds between writing your code and seeing the result on a screen. And like over the years, I have struggled quite a lot because I think, petty developers, you don't want to wait a few seconds for your code to run. But yeah, you know what? If I'm building iterative UI, I don't want to wait 30 seconds for my code to change. And it's not like, my own failing that like my attention span is like abysmal, which it is, by the way. But like seriously, it prevents pull requests. It prevents people working on things. Like I have had to contribute to code bases that I, do git checkout, npm install. A minute and a half later, things have installed. I press run, and I have to wait another minute, to see if I made the mistake. Anyway, so ESBuild, what it does is a bundler. It is written in Go, which is important because it's fast without having to do too much of magic stuff. And again, it's fast without you don't get on the fast path of the JIT. So for these run once kind of things, kind of workflows where you bundle something, it's a pretty good sort of not just language, but it's a sort of good way to author this tool. Like, yeah, it's a bundler for JavaScript. It doesn't have to be written in JavaScript itself. So that's one of the reasons why it's fast. And again, they have some benchmarks, which maybe don't trust benchmarks, but like it might take it 0.37 seconds to build something that Webpack might take 40 seconds. And again, from real projects at least, running Webpack with TypeScript might mean upwards of 30 seconds between writing something and seeing the changes, at which point your computer is kind of freezing. Like if anybody from the FIBA Play team is on the call, they can tell you what happens to their machine when they run npm run dev. And I have tried to make it fast. Like, okay, maybe I fail sometimes, but like we've reworked that thing 5 times to make it faster. So Vite, what it will do, it will use ESBuild not to bundle your code in development, but to bundle your dependencies, which I think is important. So they have it as dependency pre-bundling. Let's ask the following, right? When do the dependencies in your project change? And the dependencies in your project change when you run npm install, npm CI, your log file changes, your packagization changes. So actually, you don't need to be threading those thousands of modules every single time you make a change. You can just bundle them once. Again, for development. For production, you can do more advanced ways of bundling and chunking and however you want to do it. So that's what Vite does, is that when you run npm install, the first time you will run npm run build, and actually I can hold on. Maybe I should stop lying to you and do a presentation of my screen. Yes, I was very much afraid that I cannot share my screen, but this is the Linux life for me. It's okay. I can just tell you and I'll send you the links afterwards. It will bundle your dependencies, which already makes it quite a bit faster than the regular workflow from Webpack. Another thing it will do is that it will use the native ES modules for the browser in development. Because the browser that you're using, whatever it is, unless you're developing on IE 11, which you can do, by the way, with polyfills, to be clear, it supports the ES module format. So basically, in development, Vite runs a development server that once you request a file, it's going to serve, for example, one file for component A, one file for component B, however you have authored them basically in your source. Because again, ES modules is an authoring and a delivery format. This is quite cool because then, again, it uses very regular HTTP headers to do its caching. So if you request the same module twice, it's just going to say, hey, 3 or 4, this has not been modified, which is very good. Oh, maybe I can share. Hold on. I know what I can do. I can't share my terminal, but I can share a development server because that's on a browser. So if I do localhost 5000 here, localhost 8080 maybe. Yes. Okay. So I had a starter template with Vite, and you can kind of see if you open the network. You guys, can you check real quick? Can you see the network tab?
We cannot. If you share a tab, it doesn't show the developer tools.
See, I expected nothing from my screen sharing, and I'm still disappointed. No, but I can present the Chrome window for a reason that Jan explained to me, actually, which I think is that it's running on Wayland while my other things are not. Anyway, okay, now you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, good. So you'll see basically that if I, just to see it real quick, you have to script type. Script type module is how you say that a script is a module format, basically. Which is very nice because you can use that to target specifically the browsers that support scripts. In development, we're just targeting the Vite client, which will do some kind of magic to like run the module system and everything. And then we're also importing the main script. You can see in the network tab, if you go to JavaScript, that, for example, we're importing main.js, which is, as you might see already, it has like const and everything. So it's not really transpiling things because, again, these are already supported in modern browsers that we're developing with. So that's the core idea I want you to take from this, right? Is that even if you're bundling for production and you're transpiling things 1,000 times over, you don't necessarily need that overhead in development, and it adds up really quickly. You might even see the headers that, okay, that's a 200. Let's see if we can get it to send us a 304. We cannot. Oh, no, now we get a 304. There we go. So very standard HTTP ways of not, bombarding your computer with requests. And it's kind of okay if you have a waterfall of requests. Now, this is a very simple demo, but if main was importing like, component A and that was importing component B, it's okay if you have a cascade of requests because it's from your computer to your computer. So it's fast. And again, you have HTTP headers to handle that. Again, probably you don't want to do that in production, but it works okay in development. So that's one of the big things that Vite does that makes it fast. It sounds maybe simple, I don't know. And if it sounds simple, I think it's kind of nice. Like it sounds delightful to me. Like once I found this out, I'm like, yeah, you know what? That does make sense. That's pretty cool. And it is fast. I wish I could show you it being fast, but honestly, you shouldn't trust me because I would show you a demo app and like, okay, it built a demo app in like 100 milliseconds, which is great, by the way. It wouldn't happen in Webpack. It would be seconds still. But ideally, I would want to maybe move the FIBA code base into using Vite, but I'm not on that team anymore, so I'll think about it. What is something else that this does? Let me think. The build mode is quite nice. The documentation is pretty good. Like it's very small config, which is also good. It will handle TypeScript as well. TypeScript, it handles in a very smart way. So Vite will not run the TypeScript type checker for you. So one of the big promises of TypeScript is that you should be able to just strip the type annotations and have valid JavaScript. I don't think anybody has really tested that theory much apart from the TypeScript compiler, but it turns out that ESBuild, the tool that Vite uses in development to bundle, it parses TypeScript and then strips the type annotations. The reason you want to do that is that running the TypeScript compiler is slow. It's a gigantic thing that is massive, and it will make your computer fans spin. In particular, TypeScript does pretty well when it can be in a watch mode. So and all of these are, I think, good principles in general, whether you're using Vite or Webpack or anything else. Like I have used all of the build tools in the past 8 years, and I have come to the same conclusion every time. You don't want to be running the type checker inside of your bundler. Even if you have something like Webpack's, TypeScript loader, fork plugin, whatever those are called, you don't want to do that because it's very easy to be wiping away TypeScript's cache. So TypeScript tries to be fast by caching calls to the file system, by caching information about types, other things that you should probably ask Jan about. And it turns out that if you keep restarting it, it's the same problem as the JIT, right? It's the same conceptual problem as the JIT. It can be made really fast if it's running over and over and it's in control of the watching. But as soon as it's not in control of the watching, you're paying the big costs every time. And like that's been my make your build pipeline faster with this one trick. Go to your code base, find the part where you're calling TypeScript inside of Webpack, and try to put it into its own watch process. You're gonna thank me. I hope. If you wanna blame me, no guarantees. This software is provided with no warranty or whatever we say. So Vite, though, is good because it tells you, hey, we don't do this by default, so you can't accidentally shoot yourself in the foot with that. Like I have made that mistake multiple times. It says, hey, if you want your type checker, run it in a separate pipeline. They still run TypeScript, or ESBuild will process TypeScript much faster than the TypeScript compiler, because the TypeScript compiler, even in the mode where it doesn't actually change, it doesn't emit your files, it still has to process everything. So maybe you're saving 10 seconds if you don't emit, but it's still 30 seconds, not 40, which is not sub-second, or not even sub-second. I would take a tool that takes 3 seconds to build my code. I would be happy with that. I'm not a very demanding user even, but still anything more than that is a bit annoying. Yeah, so it will do TypeScript in that way, and then you have to basically run the TypeScript compiler by yourself in watch mode, which I think is good. And there was something else I had in mind, but I'm forgetting. Yeah, in general, avoid if you have watching processes inside of other watching processes, it's usually a red flag because something invalidates something there. And all of these tools, whenever they use caching, they like to be in control of the watching because they can invalidate the caches correctly. Yeah, so that's one of the nice things with Vite, at least. It has just nice configuration, honestly, like configuration that makes it easy to do the good thing. And of course, part of it is a side effect of it being a newer tool. Like, of course, Webpack has had 8 years to accumulate a lot of craft. Like that happens. Like entropy is gonna come for Vite as well. I'm pretty sure, like all of us. But uh, I think still there seems to be some intention, at least in how it is designed. Not that Webpack doesn't have intention, by the way. Webpack is fantastic for what it does, and I like it very much. If you want to experiment with like modern features, you want to use WebAssembly, there's a lot of really cool things you can do with Webpack. Is it possible to use Vite with Create React App? Sadly, no, but it has a template that's very similar to Create React App. By the way, yes, speaking of Vue, Vite is made by Evan You, the creator of Vue, and it has much of the same, like, more minimal intentional design about it, which I think is like it shows. It shows. If you use it, like, I think you'll see it for yourself. Vite is not the only tool, by the way, that does this. There's another tool called Snowpack, which has the same idea or a very similar idea that, hey, why are we bundling in development? Why do we not use the ES modules to do the invalidations very granularly and so on? I have not used Snowpack much. Snowpack is slightly related to this other thing called Pika, which now is called Skypack, I think, or something. Naming is hard. Where they're trying to bring ES modules in production as well. Because in production, by the way, there's a fantastic talk by Yukis, if you can find this one, gibbedford.js. If you look that up, Gib Bedford has worked on a lot of bundlers over the years. I think most lately on System.js and Rollup and so on. Yes, WMR is very similar to Vite, and I think the Preact team now is going to be moving to Vite, or at least they published a preset or a template for Vite, which is quite cool. All of this, again, and that's why I said, like, the new generation of tooling, because all of them have the similar idea. Why are we bundling in development? Why are we transpiling our code 5,000 times in development? Why are we invalidating all the watching caches? They're very related ideas. And the thing I like about it is that I've spent like 4 years of my life agonizing over this shit. And just to see it in tools that you can reuse, because, okay, making it bespoke for like a code base that I work in, fine, you do the Webpack file, you put comments everywhere, you hope that your future self doesn't forget, etc. But to make that reusable, it's such a hard task that I'm really very excited to see something that I can just npm install and have it be working. Yes, that is the talk, exactly, Yuhis. Where in that talk, he talks a lot about what would it look like to run ES modules in production. It takes a lot of effort because you need to avoid not effort, but also intentional design work about how you do the module boundaries. Anyway, you can watch that talk. I'm not going to go into that subject now. So Snowpack is how I started this tangent, is related. Vite has a nice comparison page that you can go into. I don't actually know concretely what the differences are between the tools. I haven't used Snowpack much, mostly because its page was more cluttered. And as I already told you, my attention span is abysmal and I could not make sense of it. But I'm sure if one of you is interested and wants to try it and give us a weekly talk, I will watch it. Thank you very much. But yeah, Snowpack, I think, was first. Actually, it was before Vite that had this idea. But it's also related, again, to these tools that are a bit more ambitious towards production. I think they're both good. I think they can help. If you're making, or if you're starting a project nowadays, I would tell you, try out Vite and see how it works. If you're making a hobby project and you don't feel like configuring Webpack for the umpteenth time, do that. Oh, I forgot one thing. In production mode, Vite will not use, see, I'm very excited. I like the choices they're making. Vite will not use ESBuild, which again is not ready for production yet. Maybe one day it will be in production. It is using Rollup, which again is a pretty common bundler tool nowadays. I think not as popular as Webpack, but I do think a very solid piece of software. I mostly have been using Webpack in personal, Rollup in personal projects. So it's kind of nice actually that you can reuse many of the plugins and etymology from Rollup. So again, that's also one of the more practical decisions that Vite makes, that, okay, let's make the development really fast. And then in production, maybe we're not there yet. So the build might take 10 seconds, 20 seconds or something, but you only run the build once, basically. So maybe that's fine. And again, it's still probably faster than due to other decisions that have been made. Again, running TypeScript separately for type checking and so on. I don't know what else. There's probably like 1,000 things that I would want to talk to you about, but I'm not remembering them. So if you have any questions, I will take them.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments? We can have maybe one or two at this point and then also continue in Slack. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
We'll share the links